I'm conquering the spirit, I'm busting through the ceiling. I'm following your lead, I'm following the spirit.
Hey guys, welcome back to Enlightened. It's your host Kev here. So I apologise for the lateness of this video. I had multiple things going on through the week. I just couldn't sit down and do the recording. But it's here, it's Saturday, 8th of July, and without further ado, let's get straight into it. Adam and Eve, Origin of Humanity. Now that's just the title I gave this video. It's actually going to branch out into several different areas, and I'll probably have to do a follow-up on this video. But yeah, as like the title says, Adam and Eve. So Adam and Eve in the Judeo-Christian and Islamic traditions are the original human couple, parents of the human race. In the Bible, there are two accounts of their creation. While details may differ, the same concepts of a perfect paradise that once existed is found in the writings and legends of many religions. The sequence of events recorded were exactly how it started. Original sin started with the original couple, Romans 5:12. Now, I was actually going to do a section here on original sin and talk about a few other things, but there was a few things that happened through the week, so I'm going to disregard that section for now, and we'll keep moving on. Original sin is up for debate and is contested, with some believing this is a latter addition, one rooted in oppression and placing those under the yoke of the Roman Catholic Church in perpetual guilt of sin, which Yeshua, Isu or Jesus later sacrifices himself for. But I digress on this theological point for now. Like I say, I might come back to that in the future. But just look at this image, and to be honest, I'll probably overlay all these images anyway, so I don't know why I take extra time to do this. But the beginning of human life and creation itself is open to interpretation, and here we can see genetic markers are seemingly tracking human ancestry, humanity back to a common ancestry. So yes, so as you can see in this image, we've got nuclear DNA inherited from all ancestors, and mitochondrial DNA inherited from the maternal lineage. So obviously the female, and that's all. But what we're going to see in a minute is the Y chromosome. Apologies if you can hear my neighbour. He's been whizzing for like over an hour. I've been waiting for him to finish before I record this, but like I said, I haven't got time to wait around all day. So yeah, apologise for that. I've just waited an extra 5 minutes there for the noise to stop. Hopefully it dies down sooner rather than later. So as I was saying there, the ancestry, you've got the maternal and you've got the basically nuclear DNA that comes from all your ancestors. Now we're going to look a little bit on this genetics now. So you've got this beginning of human life and creation itself is open for interpretation, and here we can see genetic markers are seemingly tracking humanity back to a common ancestry. I apologise for reading that twice, but as you can see here, you've got Y chromosome Adam. Now this Y chromosome Adam is coming down one branch, which is that nuclear branch, and then you've got mitochondrial Eve, which we're going to come on to now, coming down the other branch. So current estimates place mitochondrial Eve after the dawn of Homo sapiens, as recorded in the fossil record, and is dated allegedly to about 180,000 years ago. Until recently, Y chromosome Adam was dated later at about 50,000 years. The time of one of the mainstreams theorised significant human migrations out of Africa. So as you can see, you've got a photograph here with the new Adam. So they keep finding skeletons and bones, fragments of skeletons and bones, should I say, and then applying them to new species or older species or subspecies well, they wouldn't be subspecies because they'd be the originals, and they keep pushing the dates further and further back. And as we've looked at certain times on my channel, and we probably will do in the future as well, the chronology is difficult enough to understand going back 6,000 or 7,000 years. And these kind of scientists, this institutionalized, peer-reviewed, globalist ideology, scientific community, they keep pushing the dates back further and further. And as you can see here, like I say, you've got this new version of this Adam, but we're not going to discuss that too much because we've got other things to talk about. Now, there was this link here. Yes, I'll use this browser for now. You can't get away from these things anymore, can you? Reject all. Still makes you save and exit. You can't just reject and say no, I don't want to be part of it, because when you save and exit, you still accept cookies anyway. So the Garden of Eden was in Africa, and scientists estimate Eve lived there 195,000 years ago and Adam 140,000 years ago. DNA can build a family tree for prehistory of the human race by working it back through branches created by markers. We all inherited our DNA from our parents, and markers are tiny errors of copying that occasionally occur in reproduction in particular places and at particular times. So basically, I don't really want to go through this article too much, but there's stuff out there if people want to follow it up. But the point I wanted to make there is that, they use this dating technique. You got carbon dating, and then once you go so far back, it's not so much radiocarbon dating, it's the name slipped me, I can't think of it at the top of my head, but it's basically the estimate how the atomized structures, the structure of the item has degraded the biomatter, and then they interpret the environment, and then they say, oh, the environment must have been like this then, so then it must have degraded at this rate, and then that's how they can come up with dates outside of just radiocarbon dating, which again is just another. I don't think I've really touched too much on radiocarbon dating and the dating process in general. I touched on it briefly when I made that Egypt video, the chronology of Egypt, and as they discuss in there, they're having issues dating certain potteries and other things like of that ilk, going back only a few thousand years. And their issue in that was that the Egyptology will have a certain design for a pot at a certain epoch or certain era. So then any pottery that they find, they think slips into that era. So then they use that as a gauge for when it comes to the radiocarbon dating before they do the dating. It's like with I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but it's like with dinosaur bones. There was a group of scientists who took 10 bones to get them analysed. I think they were 10 T-Rex bones. They sent them off to a lab to get tested. The lab sent all the results back for the 15 bone fragments via the radiocarbon dating and that other method, and it came out at 10 to 15,000 years old. So the scientists, these were geocentrists, not heliocentrists, so they were looking to disprove dinosaurs in essence, and they go on to publish the findings, only for then the institution that carried out the tests, the laboratory that carried out the tests, they threw their arms up in the air and were saying the tests weren't conducted in the right place at the right time with the right equipment and all this and that. And basically that was them trying to cover up the fact that the bones weren't that old, because as they said in their press release, they weren't informed that the bones were dinosaur bones. So the the way they done the testing wasn't correct. So that in itself told you that, you know, they needed to have a framework for the bones themselves, the samples. They needed to have that, right? So it's 10 million years old. We'll have that going into this. So then that's already affecting the outcome of the tests. Anyway, that's a long story short, and it's not really anything to do with this, but it goes to show you that, like, even though I'm showing you this mitochondrial DNA and this Y chromosome DNA, there's no proof that this is actually factual. I'm putting it out there because we're looking, as we're going through history, it's constantly intertwined with biblical scripture. That was never my intention, if I'm being honest, but you can't help it. It's there, and it's being used, like the literature, the scriptures, for thousands of years. So it's a good gauge to bounce other things off as well. But yeah, let's leave this one behind for now and get back to, there we go. Oh, where are we? So these genetic markers are contested by some, though I personally would find the link plausible, given the many attempts from so-called credible sources trying to debunk the link. As I say, the same with the Adam and Eve mitochondrial. You've got certain sections of the scientific community who are trying to tell you that it's impossible for all humans to be connected to these ancestral origins of, you know, one or two. This is usually a red herring. The notion of humanity being that old boggles the mind. So yeah, I don't actually believe humanity went that far back, as people on my channel probably know by now. So how they've managed to arrive at these dates using these certain bone fragments and tying it into the whole evolution pyramid, that's where they come up with these dates, where I think that whole scientific pyramid should be scrunched up and thrown away, because there's no need for all this jargon, like stretching out of chronologies and things like that. As I put there, population growth, that's one that I want to do a video on at some point, but I'm gonna have to do the math and really sit down and break it down. But the way the populations have grown globally across the world, all over the place, they've grown at such rapid rates in the past few thousand years that, like, we've really recorded populations and things like that since your Magellans and all these explorers. Then now we're in a situation where, like I say, everything's being cast so far back that it's actually unquantifiable, and it's using so many different variables that aren't even relatable, aren't even tangible, because you can't validate these things. These are all other theories propping up theory. So the whole pyramid is in essence a joke. And the population growth, like I say, if we've gone in my lifetime from around 6 billion to nearly 8 billion, that's 2 billion in, like, not even a generation. So despite the fact that we have famine, pestilence, wars, cataclysms, all these things that have happened throughout history, the population has still kept booming and growing and growing and growing. And if you flipped it on its head and tried to look back to where it came from, it only stretches back so many thousand years. Like, if people were multiplying 150,000 years ago, just think of what the population would be now. You're talking billions of billions, not just 8 billion, you're talking like 50 billion people, surely, if you wanted to go back 100,000 years. Because I'm looking at it on the gradient of, say you go back around 10,000 years to now, the population growth, it kind of makes sense to me, tie into the migrations and all that. I might do a video on it. I did see someone else do a video on it several years ago. I might try and source that video out, and if I do, I'll either reach out to him, see if I can put it on my channel, or I'll do a review and we'll do a watch along to that video. But yeah, the DNA language, the history, the geography, it is all pointing to an area of our past only several millennia ago, not hundreds of thousands of years ago. And this out of Africa theory doesn't fly with me for many reasons. And there's many reasons, to be honest. And I've put here the last paragraph of the article I've just read states again. Oh, it's alright, I've took the quote out. Here you go. Other lineages existed at the same time as those of Adam and Eve, but they did not survive. Around 73,000 BC, a great catastrophe struck the earth. So this is the same people who are discussing the DNA, and they're claiming that Adam and Eve go back to like 100 odd thousand years and 140,000 years, whatever it was. But yeah, a cataclysm struck in 73,000 BC and wiped out all the other species of Homo sapien or Neanderthal or Homo erectus, Australopithecus, whatever, all these mad names. They're claiming all these other species of humanity were wiped out in a cataclysm, and mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome Adam somehow survived. So it boggles the mind, like I say, when you're going back that far. But the fact that they're even telling you that there was supposedly other species along with Adam and Eve, that could tie in further to some of the biblical stuff, because in the biblical side of things, Adam and Eve were the first. But I don't think I go into too much detail in this video, but this is probably why I want to do a second. There's the notion that when Adam and Eve had kids, they only had sons. So who were the women that the sons mated with to go forth and multiply? And also, when Adam and Eve left the garden, who were the people outside the garden? So this ties into some of the Anunnaki and all this kind of stuff, but we're going to come into all that. I would say knock a zero off of that figure and we may be closer to the real date. So yeah, I'd say more 7,500 years ago rather than 70 odd thousand, but I don't necessarily agree with all these other species of humanity being wiped out anyway. It doesn't really jive with me. Are we truly to believe? Oh, that's a spelling error there. Are we truly to believe that all humanity spread out from one section of Africa, one of the most dangerous and hospitable environments on the earth, sub-Saharan Africa? North Africa, Europe, Asia Minor and Asia developed into high levels of civilization and society, and seemingly around the same time, give or take a few hundred years, whilst sub-Saharan Africa, independent from Egyptian, Nubian, Guanches, Berbers, all those other civilizations that we've touched on in other videos. While sub-Saharan Africa was not developed beyond timber and mud. So you've got to think about that. Like, you've got the pyramids in Egypt, one of the wonders of the world. Apparently, you'd say maybe if they did come out of Africa, they either came out of like Ethiopia and followed the Nile all the way up into Egypt, say, which is one theory, and I can't say yes or no, but this out of Africa, so that they came out of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, somehow followed the river, arrived at the Nile Delta, well, Cairo, in the middle of Egypt, built massive monuments and pyramids, learned the stars, agriculture and everything else, and then carried on expanding out around the world. But yet sub-Saharan Africa never developed any of these traits. So we keep moving. While sub-Saharan Africa was not developed beyond timber and mud housing settlements, and spears and arrows were engaged with the weapons and slave trade with colonial powers. So when the colonial powers arrived into sub-Saharan Africa, they were fighting like the Zulu and people like that, you know, which is, unless I've got that wrong, This is no slight on Africa, not at all. Perhaps there is information I need to look into further with Africa more. I am aware of places like Timbuktu in Western Africa, the country of Mali, historically important as a trading post on the trans-Saharan caravan route and as a centre of Islamic culture, but that was like 1400 to 1600. It is located on the southern edge of the Sahara. Let us look at the maps. So as you can see on the maps now, you've got the dates here. So you've got sub-Saharan Africa, which is down here, 110 to 120,000 years ago, sorry, 190,000 years ago. So I just need to have a sip of my tea. Lemon and ginger in the ring of power. So we've got 110 to 120,000 years ago. You come further north, we've got 152 to 234,000 years ago for mitochondrial Eve. So you've got all these different fraction out and dates and all this kind of stuff, and then as you get up here into Saudi Arabia, well, the Arabian Peninsula, which we'll come back to later, and over into, well, Pakistan area, you know, that's 60,000 years up in the top right. That's it. And just slightly further north, this is where the, could say, one of the edges of this Indo-European epicenter was, because as you come into India, which you can't really see on this map, the language and the culture actually shifts as you get towards down the southwest, southeast, which is different to the culture in the northwest, which was, you know, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, the Indus Valley civilization, but we'll touch on that briefly again in a bit. So here you've got, I can't see these images all clearly, let me zoom in, don't mind. Yeah, so you've got mitochondrial you've got macro haplogroups and the dates here. So this was when we've touched on the lost tribes being in Britain and things like that. They were supposed to have gone forth and multiplied. But if you look here, you've got this, here we go, this L grouping here is supposed to be the oldest, that's in the brown, and then you come through to the M. Now where's the letter M on here? It's in this area, M1 and N1, so is the green. So as you can see, from Africa into Europe, the European DNA is the closest related to the African, by the looks of it here. And then you can come across, and then as I said, that green area just here in the middle of the screen, like round about that letter R and to the northwest, that is again that Indus Valley, this Indo-European culture. This is like the edge of it, as I say, and then it comes into India. Even though there is an amalgamation, it's difficult to say like where the borders were, what cultures actually occupied at these particular times. And once we're looking at these dates, and it's going from 1,000 to 130,000 years ago, then you might as well just take a guess, in essence. So we move through, we've got a couple more maps here to look at. So here's Y chromosome routes of migration and the mitochondrial routes of migration. As you can see, they came out of this African area, allegedly, up into Europe, across along the Mediterranean into Western Europe, up through into India, and then across into, well, Asia Minor, and then into Asia itself, really all the way down into Australia. And then you've got the predominantly the mitochondrial route going up into the north and going all the way across Siberia, across the Bering Strait and into North America that way. Now this is called Clovis first. This is believed to have been the first peoples that migrated into America. Now if you were to ask me, I'd say that's a load of hocus pocus, because how long would it take a culture to get from Africa by foot migrating with sticks all the way into Egypt, develop an advanced culture, and then all of a sudden get on the bike and travel all the way around the world. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense at all. The caveat to that would be is that they'll tell you that, well, these people were travelling long before Egypt built the pyramids. And you go, oh, okay. So then how come is it that all these pyramids around the world were kind of built at the same time? Give or take a few hundred years, 1,000 years too. These are, in the grand scheme of the timelines they're talking about, it's a drop in the ocean. So all these, whether it's down in South America, Bolivia, anywhere, it's like, it's mad. And especially once you get down to like Chile, Bolivia, these places in South America, there's the white mummies with ginger hair. So you'd be like, well, is this the oldest grouping? Is this the oldest peoples? And they travelled all this way and all the way around the world. Were they all of a similar genetic stock? Like going back well, to the start, to the birth of humanity really, the expansions and migrations around the world. If so, if they were all closely related back then maybe it'd be more possible that they have a common ancestry. Whereas today, so I say, sorry about that. So as I was saying, yeah, so you've got this population all the way around the world. You've got red mummies found over in South America, mummies, Caucasian mummies with red hair found in China, which is over here. Not to mention the Native Americans. They've got Celtic DNA as well from the Prince Madoc migrations around 500 AD. And there's older, potentially far older settlements that travelled in and out of America, going all the way back to the Phoenicians. So it's an interesting one. It's an interesting concept, but not one I believe. And then here's what's just happened there. So these last two images, basically just showing you again what we've just been talking about. The DNA, mitochondrial Eve coming out of Africa, spreading across into Saudi Arabia, going all the way east into Australia, etc., but also coming northwest into Europe. But we're going to carry on, got more to discuss. The source of this migrating DNA pairing that populated the world may be up for debate, but it is there to be observed, and we have to go further, and we have further to go in this rundown. What are you being funny for? Come on. So here we have the Homo sapiens. Unfortunately, this image, it's shrank on me, because it's not showing you all the information. But basically, I was just going to show you there that these are the different species of humans, allegedly. And as you can see, you've got Homo sapien, Homo neanderthalensis, Denisovan, and Homo erectus. Sorry, that still gets me, that name. So they go back, we've got a marker here of 400,000 years. So as you can see, Homo sapien allegedly is the DNA that carries all the way through past Homo neanderthalis and Denisovans, and eventually links up with Homo erectus, and then that's how you end up with basically modern humans of today. Now, I think it's a lot of hocus pocus. I'll just say that. I'll just leave it there. That image again that's not the full image, but basically that was going to show you where the languages intersect and connect and go back to the roots, but we have more to discuss on that in a future video. So remember, the Y gene is that of Adam and the mitochondrial that of Eve, scientifically. So that's coming from scientific institutions. They're telling you that there's a Adam and Eve ancestor. Whether you believe it or not, that's open to interpretation, but that's what they're telling us. So the fact all humans carrying these genetic traits, the very existence of such a lineage blows the lid off of the several human species completely, as any species before Homo sapien is pure speculation in my eyes, as is evolution in general. So again, just to scroll back up really quick though, they're taking Homo neanderthalis and Denisovan, finding bone fragments and saying that these are species, and then they're taking the two Homo sapiens, which is human, and Homo erectus, which you could say mitochondrial Adam and mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome Adam. You could say they're the two pieces that they're talking about right there. So the two in the middle, they're redundant. They're going older than the DNA markers that they're showing us that we have, unless they're saying all four species had that, but they don't say that. Like, you don't think I've put that in here, but you'll come across that in the literature. So the fact humans carry these traits, Homo sapiens, which is Latin meaning wise man, is the modern species to which all modern human beings belong to. Homo sapiens is allegedly one of several species grouped into the genus Homo, but it is the only one that is not extinct according to peer-reviewed academia. We shall leave the evolution debate here. Like I say, I don't really want to go into it too deep. There's still a lot to get through really. But if you look at this, where was it? The Latin meaning for Homo sapiens is wise man. Now, if you cast your mind back, Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, they eat from the fruit of knowledge, from the tree of knowledge, the apple of wisdom. They apparently, again, not to get drawn into that, but apparently it's where they learned right and wrong, original sin. But either way, in all the different traditions and stories, to become illuminated, enlightened. So it's interesting that that word carries, Homo sapien carries the title wise man in Latin, you know. So I've put a link there, but I think we're running a bit short on time here, so I'm not going to bother opening that. In the book of Genesis of the Hebrew Bible, chapters 1 through 5, there are two creation narratives with two distinct perspectives, and we're going to discuss these now. In the book of Genesis, God created humankind in God's image and instructed them to multiply and to be stewards over everything else that God had made. I think he made man on the sixth day, was it? In the second narrative, God fashions Adam from dust and places him in the Garden of Eden. The King James Bible, and these are all quotes now, and the Lord God formed man of the dust, and from the ground he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Aramaic Bible in plain English, the Lord Jehovah God formed Adam of the dust from the soil, and breathed into his face the breath of life, and Adam was a living soul. World English Bible, Yahweh God formed man from the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Very similar. Adam is told that he can eat freely of the trees in the garden except for a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So again, that's tying into like what I was saying before. Additionally, Eve is created from one of Adam's ribs to be his companion. They were told to go forth and multiply. They are innocent and unembarrassed and about their nakedness. However, a serpent, or the dragon / Satan, convinces Eve to eat fruit from the forbidden tree, who then gives some of the fruit to Adam. So I'm just getting a bit of it. Excuse me. God later curses the serpent and the ground. God then details the consequences of their sin of disobeying God. Then he banishes them from the Garden of Eden. This whole being built out this whole being built out of the earth seems to be non-literal and more allegorical, as if the dust was the earth and as if God's creation. What? This whole being built of the earth seems to be non-literal and more allegorical, as if the dust, earth, is of God's creation. I don't know how I've worded that there. The soil being non-conscious yet physical in existence, of which the breath of life was applied, seemingly the addition of the soul to the physical earthly body. So you've got Adam being a physical body and God creating Adam a physical body, but then also giving him the breath of life, giving him a soul, so he becomes sentient, God-like himself in essence, maybe. We find this breath of life across multiple cultures. In Sanskrit, prana means vital life force and yama means to gain control. The word combined, pranayama, is yogic practice of bodies breathing. One Hindu belief is that of reincarnation, the idea that when a person dies, the Atman, or breath of life / soul, will move on into the body of another being. This process is called samara, or we call reincarnation. For the ancient Egyptians, a person's life was composed of 5 distinct aspects: the physical body, Khat, the shadow, Shuyet, the name, Ren, and the physical part of the soul, Ba, and the spiritual part of the soul, Ka, or Ka. In Jewish folklore, a golem, a Hebrew word, just made me think of Lord of the Rings. Don't forget to rehydrate. A golem, Hebrew word, is an animated anthropomorphic being, or man, that is created entirely from inanimate soulless matter, usually clay or mud. So a golem is basically it's like a shell. It's a physical body, but it's got no animation. It's got no soul. In Sumerian mythology, the gods Enki or Enlil create a servant of the gods, humankind, out of clay and blood, and give them the breath of life. Askar and Embla in Norse mythology. I recommend you go and check out my Norse creation video on the Edda. It's pretty fascinating read that talks about Ymir and Yggdrasil and all this other stuff. They were created, Norse mythology, the first man and woman. Askar and Embla, notice the A and the E though. Adam and Eve, Askar and Embla, correlation there. With the first man and woman, respectively, parents of the human race, again Norse tradition. They were created from the tree trunks found on the seashore by 3 gods, Odin and his 2 brothers, Vili and Vi, or Ve, some sources name. The gods Odin, Hoine and Lodor, again that's another variation of the names. Odin infused the wood with the breath of life and spirit, while his brothers gave them blood and senses. So again, we're getting the creation of these people out of matter, physical matter, and then a soul is being applied. And what's interesting there is the Norse, obviously Scandinavia, Germanic peoples, they have their creation story here, which is kind of similar. Again, not the same, but you've got Adam and Eve, and you've got, what was it again? Askar and Embla. Now, if the migration of the lost tribes came out from Mesopotamia, say, or Britain, could be either or at this point, and migrated across, then that'd explain why you get the Ashkenazi Jews, and in the Norse mythology, the ash tree is significant. It's a very significant tree, the ash, and you've got other references to ash that I'm not going to cover in this video, but that kind of ties into the whole moving along of these people's traditions, languages and stories that just evolve and change. So back to where we were. If Adam and Eve left the garden and were indeed banished, would Adam not take up grievance with the serpent that had deceived the pair? If we think back to the St. George video, we can see multiple references to King Adam slaying the dragon across many cultures, and we've seen all different variations in that video. Neither Adam nor Eve is mentioned elsewhere in the Hebrew scriptures, apart from a single listing of Adam in genealogy in 1 Chronicles 1:1. So again, this Adam, well, I'm not going to go there, to be honest. The story of Adam and Eve is often depicted in art and has been a major influence in the literature and poetry for millennia. When we examine Adam's narrative, Genesis, more closely, we find it has less to do with biological questions of human origins and more to do with the biblical theme of kingship. Now, I probably should have worded that a little bit different actually. Basically what I mean there is, in the Bible, where Adam comes out of Eden, he goes on to establish his line, his lineage, that goes then all the way through to Jesus, if you will, or to us even, if you believe that. Now, the thing that's interesting there is, the Bible is very, well, there's different versions of the Bible, for one, different stories, different interpretations of events as well, different geographical locations, depending on what scholar you listen to, whether it's a rabbi, a priest, all this different stuff. Now, we've found that there's other references to these ancient kings and ancient origins. So, was the book of Genesis basically laying out the foundation for what that would then later become King Adam? He was the first, I was going to say the Alpha and Omega then, but obviously that's a God attribution, but he was given the breath of life. Could he have had extra abilities, him and Eve? Longer life, greater intelligence, bigger stature, thicker bone density, see in the dark, who knows, all that kind of stuff. So, excuse me, I'm going to have a sip of this. Must be past the half-an-hour mark. Could it be that Adam, as first king rather than the first human, is the true trajectory of the book of Genesis? Don't forget these biblical books and scriptures, a lot of them are being changed through different councils and that as well. Jesus was said to be the King of Kings, a title attributed to Thor/Adam. I have a couple of quotes, and there are more references to be found throughout the Gospels, etc. Another title there. Timothy 6:15, which he will bring about at the proper time, he who is the blessed and only sovereign, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So this is Jesus, don't forget. Revelation 1:5, verse and concepts from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead and the ruler of the kings of the earth. We shall cover Jesus in a later video, which we will do because there's growing information that is saying that I'm going to have to do a video on Jesus. If we analyse the genealogy, we can see that Jesus was from the line of David from to Abraham, from Abraham to Noah, and from Noah to Adam, via Japheth, I believe, the son of Noah. Sorry, that's not supposed to say Adam, that's supposed to say Jesus. Oh no, yeah, that's right, it's supposed to say Adam. We have been reading the British Edda, the great epic poem of the ancient Britons, on the exploits of King Thor. Waddle also makes reference to Thor being Arthur, which I actually agree with more the Cymric Arthur rather than his version, or King Adam as his knight in establishing civilization. This working going back some 5,400 years ago and encompassing many religions, nations and philosophies. So that's like how far back we've been kind of reaching with these recent videos, and we've still got to expand further. And if we look at the Sumerian kings list found on clay tablets discovered in the city of Ur, of which there is also to be found in Egypt the Abydos kings list, also known as the Abydos table, is a list of the names of 76 kings going back to the golden age of Zet-Tepe. That's found in the temple of Edfu. The Sumerian kings list records that 8 kings reigned before the Great Flood, so before the time of Noah. So from Adam to Noah this is. According to the ancient astronaut theory, the story in Genesis According to the ancient astronaut theory, the story in Genesis is the Bible. According to the ancient astronaut theory, the story in Genesis is the Bible. According to the ancient astronaut theory, the story in Genesis in the Bible shows that the Anunnaki created humans. In books such as the Lost Book of Enki, the late Zachariah Stitchin gives an interpretation of the Genesis story of creation, theorizing that humans were created through an ancient astronaut genetic experiment conducted by a race of extraterrestrial beings known as the Anunnaki, which means those who from heaven to earth came. These beings inhabited a distant orbiting planet called Nibiru, which only entered our solar system every 3,600 years on an elliptical orbit, causing destruction on Earth and out in space. Allegedly, that comes into the whole Tiamat and celestial conflict between planets and all that kind of stuff, that some people believe actually the Mabinogi, which is it's the Welsh, it's like a Welsh Bible, you know what I mean? And I don't mean that Welsh Bible that could be fake, which name escapes me right now, but the Mabinogi talks about like Prydain, Owain, and all these different characters that you'd associate with like the Knights of the Round Table, if you will. Well, apparently this is like an allegorical description of climate events, planets colliding, seas rising and all that kind of stuff. I didn't see that when I read through the Mabinogi, which I'd like to go back and read again, because I did find a reference to Helen somewhere when I was reading it, and I'd love to go back and see if that could maybe tie into the Helen of the whole Trojan conflict, who knows. Expand further if you want. Well, I've just done a little bit. I was thinking about doing a whole section there, but I think I might do that in another video relating to Nibiru, the Anunnaki and all this. There is a notion that the flood was local to Mesopotamia, and this is how the story travelled around the cultures of the world, but I digress on that for now. So this is under the illusion that Sumeria was the focal point of and the birth of humanity, because there's an idea that the Garden of Eden comes from up north in between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. So I think that area is called the Arden or something like that, or the Eden, something similar. So that's why there's that notion, and humanity apparently spread out from there. The early figures of the Bible, such as Adam, lived extremely long lives compared to modern lifespans, a theme current with the two aforementioned kings lists. The tables ending with the rise of Babylonia and Hammurabi around 800 BC. So that's only 4,000 years ago. Not to mention the Anunnaki and Nephilim themselves. Yeah, I've got the little Google thing there. Anunnaki translates as those who Anu sent from heaven to earth. They were also called Nephilim, meaning to fall down to earth, to land. Elohim in the Bible, meaning these beings. So now we're moving right away from that evolution sphere, and we've gone through the God creation aspect of Adam and Eve, and we're now getting into say the ancient astronaut theory and genetic experimentation. Enoch, for example, lived 365 years. Could he be En-men Dorana, also Doranki of Zimbe? Sorry, difficult words then. The city known as Sippar was an ancient Sumerian king in the 7th Sumerian king in the king's list. He was the 7th king in the Sumerian king's list. I got lazy here. But the point I'm making about that is he reigned for 365 years, right? Well, we're going to discuss Enoch now and the difference between the solar and lunar calendar, which is of course 365 days. It's just madness. So Enoch, for example, this 365 days ties into solar worship. That the Enoch calendar is a 12-month solar calendar having 364 days only, and it was used by the antediluvian patriarchs and Noah, Abraham and Jacob. It was taught to Moses by the angel Yah, and it continued in effect through the Second Temple period under Ezra and Nehemiah. It was the official Hebrew calendar until the 2nd century BCE, when King Antiochus IV Epiphanes ended the use of the Enoch calendar and forced the Hebrew people, sons of Eber or Heber, root word for Hebrew, which is something I want to come to in a later video, to observe the lunar calendar. So this goes into that lunar worship again. You know, it's almost like it goes from being a solar worship to a lunar worship, and yeah, it's madness. It's mad stuff. I've got a couple of links there, but that's the Abydos Kings list and the Sumerian Kings list. I won't click on them because I'm only halfway through this video and I didn't realise it was so big. There's, excuse me, the Kings lists, like I say, are from a golden age, a pre-dynastic, a pre-mortal dynastic age, one might say. So this is the age of heroes to the Greeks, and they all lived long lives, exceedingly long lives, and all reigned and had massive kingdoms, which I touched on in a previous video. That's one way I can rationalise like one culture, one story, one tradition going so far, because if you've got one king, and so you've got a king and a group of people that are living longer lives, then surely they're going to achieve more. That's why we see stretching out in the chronology. But I digress on that for now. Oh yeah, these kings lists for me are a stretching out of chronology. It is fascinating to see that the Indo-European cultures have intersecting ideology, language and mythology, even though they believe it to be true up until the Enlightenment, from Galileo, Darwin and Newton, etc. Excuse me. So yeah, I mean, you're seeing up until this period piety, reverence, people really paid attention to the faiths and things like that, and not so much, it didn't have to be religious, it didn't have to be Roman Catholicism, but people, whether it was the old gods or whatever, people really did venerate a higher power, and they believed that we were mortal and there was immortal above us, you know, kind of thing. And Yet this period, I think they were touch on this, no, I don't think it did. But basically this period of time as well, you see in 1707 you have a reformation in Britain, a signing of the Union, where Britain is founded. Up until this point, there was no Britain. People say Britain was named after Brutus, but that kingdom had gone. By the turn of the first millennium BC, you had the Romans coming over, causing all kinds of mayhem. Then you had the Saxons, the Jutes, the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Normans, the Vikings, the Danes, the Germanic tribes. You know, you had all these different cultures coming in and out of Britain, and turned it into a bit of a smelting pot, really. But then, in essence, that is what was supposed to take place with the lost tribes. They were supposed to come back together. Hence why there's the Hebrew variation of the word Briton, which is like the land of the covenant and things like that. But then, like I say, you've got not only that aspect, and just to finish that what I was saying there actually, and then in 1707, England and Scotland signed a union, which then, through multiple reforms, became the British Empire, which some would say, I'm going to go on a segue here, I apologise, I was actually having a debate the last few days with Llewellyn. He's descended from Llewellyn the last king of Wales, and he's got a Facebook group and a few different things, and he's all about trying to reinstate his family's line and what he believes is the true history of Britain. But I have major disagreements with him. I agree with a lot of things, but I disagree on a lot of things. Predominantly his term of the word English and who the English are, and all that kind of stuff. But it's a very fascinating time period. Once you turn from the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, up until modern day, we see the Renaissance. Well, let's just finish that off. A lot of other families around Europe get wiped out as well, by the way. And the reason why that 1707 union happened in Britain was so that they could appoint a new monarch. Was it Mary Anne Boleyn? No, I think it was Anne of the Scots. I can't remember her full name, but she became queen of the new union. Now, some people see that as a submission to a British monarchy, but yet at the same time, there's no submission there, because they sign a deal. In the deal of her taking the throne, she is not her heirs. She won't have any heirs. It was the Germanic family over in Hanovera. It was, I can't think of the lady's name, but she opted out. She was too old. Her son took the throne, whose name was like Sophia or something like that, who became George I. And then that's how the Hanoverians got on the throne of Britain. Sorry if that was long-winded, but just off the top of the dome. And obviously Galileo, Darwin and Newton, we see an absolute radical reform of the sciences, from history to the maps. A lot of the maps change around this period. You go back earlier than that, there's different mentions of continents, islands, weather systems and all that. You get the Jesuits and their chronology comes into it, the whole scaling of chronology that absolutely destroys the timelines. You know, there's a whole lot of stuff that happens in this time. Major reformations that have led into this globalist, peer review, progressive, I don't want to say left wing, because I'm not a left or a right person. I think the two ends are the same coin, you know. But there's radical people who are in power today who are pushing all this kind of stuff as their sciences and their religion. The very structure of the world, from philosophy, history, religion and geopolitics, were all revolutionized, accompanying the Industrial Revolution and conflict. and conflict after conflict, both domestically and internationally, from national revolutions to full-scale wars. So you've seen the rewriting of histories all over the place. Got into India, America, South America, China, Japan, Korea. They're all over the place. Egypt, Mesopotamia, Leonard Woolley doing all his digging over there. You know, over this time, like, there was so much power in the world had never been brought into the hands of such few for the population of the world, you know, and the land masses. There is no doubt that the Sumerian mythology had an impact on subsequent civilizations. The Akkadians, the first empire to rule all of Mesopotamia, were definitely inspired by the first civilization, as they adopted many of the Sumerian traditions, including its mythology. Greek and Roman mythologies also contain echoed themes that suggest the roots of their beliefs came from the well-known Sumerian beliefs as well. Now, again, some people believe that ancient Sumer is in Mesopotamia, some believe that ancient Sumer is in Great Britain. I couldn't say on that for now. Some of these tablets contain stories that share many, and these are the tablets that were found up in like Nineveh and Ur and places like that. Some of these tablets contain stories that share many very similar components to stories found in early Genesis, including the story of Adam and Eve, the biblical flood, and the confusion of a once universal language. So Genesis, the book of Genesis now, tells the readers that the Nephilim, which means the fallen ones, then translated into English, were the product of copulation between divine beings, lit sons of God, illuminated, and human women, lit daughters of Adam. I don't know what that lit means. But the Nephilim are known as great warriors and biblical giants. Ezekiel 32:27, and they shall not lie with the mighty that are fallen of the uncircumcised, who are gone down to hell with their weapons of war. And they have laid their swords under their heads, but their iniquities shall be upon their bones, though they were the terror of the mighty in the land of the living. Sorry, I was thinking while I was reading now. Numbers 13:33, and there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. So these must have been giants back then, you know. In the King Og video, the circumcision of the giant is mentioned, and these Nephilim were allegedly larger than the average man and capable of great feats of strength and intelligence, though the King Og of the Bible seems to be the last of his kind, surviving, that's supposed to say, by clinging onto or being on board Noah's ship. The tales vary. So yeah, in that King Og video, we discuss his connection to the Nephilim, the Rephaim, the Great Flood, and all that kind of stuff. And we found things over in Britain. Another example, as touched on previously, is of this long stretching connection that transcends language, ethnicity, and geography. And that is the person in the Bible known as Abraham, who is the father, you might say, of all Abrahamic religions, Judeo, Christian, and Islamic. Abraham allegedly came from the city of Ur in Mesopotamia and travelled to Egypt, etc. Yet we have already shown in a previous video that he, Gog Magog, I was supposed to say some typos in this, I apologise. I did proofread it, but I was on a time limit. Yet we have already shown in a previous video that the Gog Magog Hills found to be the location of Troy the First, and being beginning to believe more and more. Sorry, that's a table. Yet we have already shown in a previous video that the Gog-Magog hills found to be the location of ancient Troy. I am beginning to believe more and more. We found there the name Bar Abraham or B Abraham and some other biblical connections made to Abraham in that video. On the opposite side of this Indo-European expansion, we see the Hindu culture had a founding figure who went by the name Brahma. The origins of this term, Brahma, are uncertain, particularly because several related words are found in the Vedic literature, such as Brahman for the ultimate reality and Brahmana for priest. So Abraham is the main priest, the father priest of those monotheistic Abrahamic religions, but yet we have Brahma, who is a priest, coming in through that Indus Valley connection into India. Could it be that Brahma and Abraham were one and the same, and he was able to travel and spread his knowledge due to his long lifespan? I'm supposed to say span, bloody hell. Due to his long lifespan. Did he preach philosophy the same that he left an impression on everywhere else west of the Ganges, Abrahamic religions, or perhaps as a powerful king with an army that led a crusade which left a lasting impression on the Hindu culture? So yeah, I'm saying there, could he have been wandering into India and preaching his newfound faith in religion off his visions that he got from the Lord, from God, that led him to become this father figure, if you will? And there's more similarities, to be honest. Those examples are opposite ends of the spectrum. So yeah, could he have been spiritually, or could he have been like a king and been conquering lands? You know, who knows? Those examples are opposite ends of the spectrum. That is in principle theoretical. I hold my hands up, it's theoretical. Though this Abraham or Brahma or Bar Abraham, as we found in Britain, influence may have been what led to Buddhism branching out of Hinduism and leading to Taoism of the East, because the philosophical principles are very monotheistic and almost Christian once you get further east. The Tao of Taoism/Taoism is generally defined as the source of everything and the ultimate principle underlying reality, which in essence is a God, an omnipotent everything, you know. The long lifespans is something we need to cover in the near future. We shall look now in finer detail at why the notion that King Adam was the first king, not just the first man. So I apologise, that section was quite deep and it touches on a lot of different aspects of the whole creation mythology, but this bit's a bit more, like, we've got some images for this bit anyway, let's put it that way. So yeah, Adam was the first king, not just the first man. Interesting. Note the number 7 is recurrent in that the temple at Edfu, which was the Egyptian king's list, the Hindus and the Sumerians believed in 7 rishis, states, wise ones, and found across Indo-Europe. So you've got, like I say, you've got rishis, what else did I say? Rishis, wise ones. I'm trying to think what's the. You have like shamans, sages. That's the word I'm looking for. You have the sages in the Hindu tradition. So you've got all these, like that number 7, and then you've got these different cultures that have 7 rishis, like I say, wise men and stuff like that. It's a reoccurring theme. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit tired now. This video's gone on quite long. Maybe I should have broke it down into two. Let me know, do you reckon I should break these videos into two? So here we have King Thor, Argos, Thor carrying of the Woodwind or Odin magic bowl on his head like a hat, taken from a Hittite stele trophy from Bergerac, now in the British Museum. So as you can see in there, he's got the magic bowl on his head. To be honest, that looks like a magician's hat, I'm not going to lie, and it looks like he's holding a ping pong racket. This image is of a Hittite seal circa 2200 BC, which is this second image. King Adam, here Thor, or Arthur, consecrates the Eden magic bowl. This is a quote now from Waddle. Actually, I should have put this in quote marks. Apologies. So King Adam, here Thor, or Arthur, consecrates the Eden magic bowl as the Holy Grail. The Eden magic bowl. So this is in his hand here. Notice the king holds the bowl in his right hand. In front of him are 4 sun crosses with handles, which are Egyptian ankhs, also the symbol for the breath of life. Each surmounted by a sun hawk and 3 more hawks below, making 7 in total. 7 in Sumerian is Imin or Hinin, or heaven, and the signs below the bowl equals life. So as you can see, here's Adam, Thor. He's got the bowl in his hand, which is the vestral bowl of Eden. And then you've got the breath of life. I mean, there's got to be some kind of story in there. I mean, I don't know what it is, but there's got to be some kind of heavy significance in there. And then you've got this image here, which is of a, looks like, I'd say a priestess, but it could be a man. Looks like he's got breasts. Excuse me. Here is the Vestal Virgin of the Sun cult bearing the sacred bowl. So she is a virgin. Found in a Phoenician tomb in Cyprus. As you can see, the solar swastika and dotted sun circles on her attire. So you've got the correlation to the number 7 again in this area. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 spots, solar swastikas and the bowl. So you've got the bowl of the vestral bowl of Eden, along with the swastika, which is the symbol of life, and then you've got the seven dots, which is heaven. So you've got Eden, heaven and life all in the one outfit or one image. So these are all out of sequence again, I apologise. So you got Thor, Sig, Odo or Adam from the Hittite stele. Note he is bearded in Gothic dress with a shaven upper lip, horned hat, long boots with turned up toes, and carrying in his right hand a hammer and in his left hand a torch. King Thor or Odo as Sumerian deified King Udu or Odo, the sun god, from King Hammurabi's law code. That says Hammurabi, but it's Hammurabi, not that it matters. Circa 2000 BC, note his fine Aryan type, shaven upper lip and Gothic horned hat. Again, King Adam, Thor or Sig, Sumerian Sag, Sax or Zax, deified as Zeus, from the early Greek vase painting 6th century BC. Note in Hittite Sumer, the shaven upper lip, bolt in the right hand, 27 crosses, 9 by 3 On skirt, 9 crosses representing the sun crosses of Thor in the Edda. Excuse me. And equating to the Greek mystic number 9 for Prometheus, which is the attachment to the flame and the torch. Thor's Eddic title of Bo-Miot Asa. Sorry, probably butchered that name. The ancient Persian Zoroastrian religion, the ancient Greeks Hesiod's poem, ancient Chinese Yellow Emperor, Egyptians, Tibetans, Peruvians, Mexicans and others, all potentially derived from the same Caucasian ancestry, which I did mention previously, that in the Caucasus regions, apparently there was an expulsion of 3 Caucasoid humans, and this is all based on cranial shape, eye colour and other little elements like that. But apparently these 3 human Caucasoids, or human white people in essence, came out of this area and can be found in all these traditions I've just mentioned. Zoroastrianism is one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions and could be an iteration of Adam/Thor, perhaps, but I need to look further into that potentiality. It was founded by the prophet Zoroaster in ancient Iran approximately 3,500 years ago. Again, so we're going back into this age of heroes. It has a dualistic cosmology of good and evil within the framework of a monotheistic ontology, and the coming to the end of this human epoch, which predicts the ultimate conquest of good by evil. Now this sounds very much like the book of Revelation and the final battle of good versus evil, but I digress on that. So there could be some connections there, but I don't really know Zoroastrianism that much. It's pretty new to me at this moment. Hesiod, Greek Hesiodus or Latin Hesiodus, flourished around 700 to 800 BC and was one of the earliest Greek poets, often called the father of didactic poetry. Hesiod's poem, Come Hither and of Zeus your father, Hesiod's poem, and I quote, Come hither, come hither and of Zeus your father, tell through whom all mortal men throughout their days, acclaimed or not, talked of their nameless dwell, so great is he. He strengthens easily the weak, makes weak the strong, and the well-known obscure, makes great the low, the crooked he makes straight, high thundering Zeus upon his throne. This character sounds more as though he is the creator of the Bible, Yahweh, than an Olympian god. So again, I'm starting to believe that classical Greece is a whole new rewriting of earlier tales, new names, new faces, some names and faces the same, but it's basically a retelling of older stories, and information changes, parts of it change, they absorb part of the old to incorporate into the new. And in this case here, like, when you go back that far, and don't forget this is the first author of the father of didactic poetry in the Aegean, in the ancient world. He came before all the other classical Greek authors. He's describing Zeus as like a Christian god, as like a god of the Bible. Now, if Adam is Zeus, if Adam is Thor, then is it not possible that Adam was very pious? He was a king of God, you know. I don't know, but that's just like what screams out to you when you read that. But we keep going. There's not that much longer left to go, guys, to be honest. The book of Revelation, also erroneously called the book of Revelations, is the final book of the New Testament. Its title is derived from the first word of the Koine Greek text, apologise, meaning unveiling or revelation. Now this is where we're going to tie back into some older videos now. Koine also went by the term the Alexandrian dialect. Excuse me, Biblical Greek or New Testament Greek, and was the common supra-regional form of Greek spoken and written during the Hellenistic period, the Roman Empire and the early Byzantine Empire. My God, I'm struggling here. So you've got, once you go back, you've got this language, this Koine, which, to be honest, I think I've typed out what I want to say. It is said to have evolved from the spread of Greek following the conquest of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, which we have discussed in a previous video, that Macedonia, Sparta and Crete all have Doric lineage. This language replacing the original language of the area around 1000 BC. So this Greek language, again, that late, the Koine or Koine Greek, which basically was, after Alexander had left, well, the Dorians came in, this new language evolved in the area, mingled with a few other bits and bobs of cultures, and then Alexander conquered everywhere, made it his administrative language, and then once he passed away, the language split out. The introduction of the Phoenician style phonetics took root and then began the further expansion of this new system into many dialects, spanning the breadth of the ever-integrating Indo-European culture. This is also in the mainstream to be the period post-Alexander the Great's death, when nations like the Ptolemaic Egyptians and the Seleucid, etc. integrated further into the occupied territories and developed the languages, customs, histories and other such things as is to be expected. Attic Greek, a sub-sister dialect of Ionic, was for centuries the language of Athens, because Attic was adopted in Macedon before the conquest of Alexander the Great. So the Attic language, which became part of the Koine language of which Alexander spread, and as we've discussed, well, let's just finish this sentence. Excuse me. Before Alexander, the conquest of Alexander and the subsequent rise, of Hellenism, so it became the standard dialect that evolved into Koine Greek. So like I say, that language spread out, and then when you had other migrations here, there and everywhere, that language just spread further and further, because this area also became quite powerful. The arrival of these Doric peoples that later became Sparta and Macedonia, as well as occupying the islands such as Crete and being on the Anatolian Peninsula, perhaps even Cyprus and the Levant, perhaps even reinforced from the Canaanites due to this older trade connection, coincides with the collapse of the Hittite Empire. Also, which is interesting, as I cross this image, which someone else has clearly pondered this concept. Now that image, I do want to just that. Is that the first one? Just up here. Yes, it's this image. So as you can see here, you've got the arrival of the Dorians. So you've got a sea route. Now this has got the coming in through the north, and it says Mycenaean. Now I disagree with a lot of the information in this image, but the arrows are pretty accurate for what I believe as well. So imagine where it says the Mediterranean Sea here, I envision the Dorians coming in this area, because they're found all along this, like a half moon across the bottom of the Aegean, as well as in a line coming from where it says Mycenaean, the M and the Y say, all the way up to the Baltic Sea. And we found several runic cultures to be found in this area through Serbia, Hungary, places like that. Indeed, the Hasselt Empire is on like eastern Austria and places like that. So it all ties in far more complex ways than I'm going to describe here. So in this image, as you can see, that's the Attic language that eventually comes up here to Macedonia. But this Attic language is basically this Doritic language that comes in, like I say, found on Anatolia, Crete, Sparta, and you've got this land Doritic influx, which later became Macedonia and Sparta as well. So I believe that's one culture, that Doritic culture, but that's open to debate. There's other people who've got different opinions. And then you've got the Ionic, which is part of this northern Attic as well. So all this comes together to create that Chionic Greek. So it's an amalgamation of all these things. One of the first connections Alexander has to Israel is when he decided to take on the Persians in war. The Persians controlled the Levant, Egypt and other neighbouring nations, and were seen as a threat to Macedonia's existence. Just that image there as well, by the way, I have shown that in a previous video. Just shows again the Dorians moving around. And as you can see on this image, you've got the Dorians right in the centre. Josephus, 37 to 100 AD, in the 1st century, was a Roman Jewish historian who briefly records Alexander's triumph in his book 12 of the Antiquities of the Jews. He provides a very simple and concise statement concerning Alexander's triumph over his and most other nations' Persian enemy. What? He provides a very simple and concise statement concerning Alexander's triumph over his and most other nations' Persian enemy. Let's see. The book reads, now then, Alexander, king of Macedon, had put an end to the domination of the Persians and had settled the affairs of Judea. So, this Alexander, he wasn't just a conqueror, you know, he's like he's a diplomat. He's introducing language, he's introducing systems of governance, setting up infrastructure in all these different places. But it's interesting, as I said in the previous video, he never once goes west. Never once goes west. Except into Greece, you know. Of course, Alexander's victory enabled the Jewish people to learn the ancient Greek language, which resulted in most ancient biblical manuscripts being written in ancient Greek, which was how this Doric Phoenician Sea People influence spread and took hold. So if it's telling you there that when we got like the Bibles, I've got a number of Bibles back there, but they're all written in English. But if you go back, as we talked about when it came to the Homer's Iliad, you find they were written in Latin and believed to, like, this is the codices and the codexes of the Homeric poems, the Vinicius A manuscript, I believe it's called. They are written in Latin, but they are believed to have been originals in Greek that were copied. Now, this Greek language has got roots in the West, as we've shown. So it's you know what, there's just so much stuff going on. And then when you put this Doric Phoenician Sea People's culture in. You've got all this influence taking place, and like I said earlier on in the video, potentially these Dorians, etc., were even reinforced from the Levant, from the land of Canaan, because this is where the Phoenicians were supposed to have came out of. But yeah, you've got this culture that's already travelling along the Mediterranean. It's got trade, it's got sun worship, it's got the same language, well, similar language structures, part of the Indo-European branch. There's all kinds going on there. And then all of a sudden, around 1100 BC, you get in the east of England a massive influx of Frisian, French DNA into East Anglia, which is the exact location of where this Battle of Troy was meant to have took place 1100 years ago, the exact same time. And then at the exact same time, give or take a few years, you see this mass expulsion coming into the Mediterranean. Now, we're told that it came out from the Levant, but yet, if that was the case, why would the later Bibles and things like that conquered by Alexander, like, why would they want to have a different language? Why would they have a different language? If the expansion came from the east, it should have a connection to the languages in the east, not a connection to the languages in the west, as well as the mythology and all the other traditions that go along with it. So I'm sorry if I've lost people here. Fair play to if anyone stayed in and watched it for this long. Now, as I have said previously, this indicates to me that people I'm not finished typing then, it doesn't matter. What is also interesting are the links between Sparta and Macedonia, then the fall of Sparta to Rome. A siege of Sparta took place in 272 BC and was a battle fought between Epirus, led by King Pyrrhus, and an alliance consisting of Sparta under the command of King Arius I and his heir Acrotatus and Macedon. So Macedon and Sparta, like bros, because they're both Doric. The battle was fought at Sparta and ended a Spartan Macedonian victory. The next recorded conflict is of two armies that met when a Roman-led coalition of Greek states took on Sparta in the Laconian War of 195 BC. Roman allies in this war included the Achaean League, Macedon, Pergamon and Rhodes. So the Romans, they claimed descent from the same people who the Dorians, I believe, are descended from, which is the Trojans. So it all kind of ties in weird little ways, which eventually led to the fall of Sparta and Macedonia as powerful states. Could this have been an older alliance of this bloodline versus the Roman expansion? So Rome tried to rewrite British history. They tried to take the church and Christian worship from Britain to Rome. So Rome has precedent for doing this kind of thing. And let us not forget Rome's ties with Germania and the Holy Roman Empire, but we shall leave that there for now. So again, this more Germanic peoples of Central Europe, like Central Western Europe, they made ties with Rome and influenced Rome greatly over the years, especially towards the end, which then eventually led to Austria becoming the Holy Roman Empire, because they claimed lineage and contact and stuff. The stories of Adam and Eve, the breath of life, don't worry guys, this is it, we're nearly there now. The stories of Adam and Eve, the breath of life and language that rose The story of Adam and Eve, the breath of life, language. The story of Adam and Eve, the breath of life and language that these stories surely had a root source. The stories of Adam and Eve, the breath of life and the language that wrote these stories surely had a root source, though we may never know the full truth. Are we truly all linked genetically to one mother and one father? I could not say either way. It would come down to if you trust the particular scientific literature. According to some traditions in Hinduism, the first human beings, or the first male and female, were created out of clay or wet dust by Vishnu, who was part of the Holy Trinity of Brahma, Vishnu and I want to say Shiva, but I don't think it's Shiva. In the Quran, Adama or Adam and Eve, Hawa, the first male and females, were created specially by Allah from clay. There are several forms of clay or kaolin clay, of which some attribute the varying colours to the varying complexions of humanity. I do not subscribe to evolution and have not really mentioned it. The notion that life came from no life and that humanity evolved from a single-celled organisms over eons of time is about as fantasy as human life being as a divine spark and a designed or engineered body with a soul. So it comes down to, in essence, to a belief. So yeah, you can either choose to believe one way or the other. It has no bearing on my life. Though it is clear an activation of sorts took place, my belief right now is we are bodies harnessing souls and crafting our own realities. Where was the Garden of Eden? I have come across theories from Mesopotamia to Britain, as I've touched on, and most are valid to the respective ideologies. Again, take it how you want it. Who was Abraham? Again, whenever we do a dive into these topics, we come out with more questions than answers. Ain't that the truth? Now this is a word. Harish Chandra, a tale in which a father must prove his worth through great family sacrifice, bears notable comparisons to the biblical counterpart, such as the sacrifice of Abraham was about to murder his son Isaac when an angel interrupted and rewarded him for his obedience to the divine will. However, predating the earliest known references to Abraham by at least a couple of centuries, the Hindu legend of Harishchandra or Harishkranda, seems like the same spelling to me, However, predating the earliest known references to Abraham by at least a couple of centuries, the Hindu legend of Harishchandra, a king through varying accounts, of how or why came to owe However, predating earliest known references to Abraham by a couple of hundred years, allegedly, the Hindu legend of Harishchandra. There's something we're going to look at now. So Harishchandra, a king through varying accounts of how or why, came to owe Vishwamitra, a sage, so that's one of the sages, the right to his kingdom. So was Abraham one of these sages, willingly parting with his worldly possessions and title. Vishwamitra, sorry I'm butchering that word, still demanded an additional fee, and so Harishchandra sold his wife and son to raise more funds, which is similar to Abraham in Egypt. There are similarities between individuals seemingly on a physical level yet differ on spiritual philosophy. And there are many more parables across things discussed, too many for one video. And again, I could have put so much more in this video. In a potential / most likely future video, we shall look into the genealogy and timelines further, plus we shall look at Adam and Eve's offspring and potentially expand further on other materials discussed. For now, I shall leave this recording here. Thank you for those in attendance. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe and all that good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.